for the drums.
Hey, Jonathan,
Hey Keith,
what you got today?
something I'm really excited about. I've been working on answering questions around using Tableau's totals for literally over a decade right now. So, all the way back in 2012, this was my first blog post about customizing grand totals. And I had some other questions recently around it and thought this would be a great time to revisit that content, update it for how Tableau works now, dive into some more details about it, cover some use cases that I didn't cover earlier, and make a bunch of videos on it that'll be useful to people. So I'm really excited to do our first one today.
Okay, super. A new series with 10
Mhm.
years of Jonathan Drummey's experience on totals and grand totals. All
Yes,
right.
and this will also tie into the mental models post series that you're doing right now as well. So we'll reference it and cross-link it where it's useful.
Right. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Because some of this
Hmm.
stuff can get down in the weeds and the mental models pulls us out and we can
Hmm.
kind of cross-reference and weave the
Yep.
two together.
Yeah, exactly. I almost said totally, but I'm going to try to avoid puns. Um, so with that, so the kind of the areas we're going to cover in this series, just really quick, um, are total versus window functions, because understanding this difference in the way the total table calculation function works and the window functions work is going to help us understand everything else with totals and why they work the way we expect sometimes and don't at others. And then we're going to talk about in our next video, what is that out of the box functionality? What is it that Tableau can do? Point and click, real easy. And then the whole rest of the series is going to be on different ways we can customize totals. Um, and there's about 8 different videos covering different use cases on that.
Okay. How to get the totals to
So,
do what you want.
yep. Yeah, and use them in ways that maybe people at Tableau wouldn't like, but get the job done. Uh,
I love it.
so, yeah.
If I can concede, I just always avoid the grand totals, especially
Hmm.
because it's this opaque, weird thing that it behaves in kludgy ways, and
Hmm.
I just never bothered to
Well,
learn. So I'm excited about this because I'm going to actually be able to fill out my ability to work with those things.
yeah, yeah, you'll be a fantastic audience for demystifying what totals are doing. So with that, let's dive into our total and window functions.
Okay.
So, so I really see this as kind of useful Tableau knowledge. We're going to do some orientation to grand totals and subtotals in this video and dive deeper into them as we go. And then kind of one of the ways this shows up for people sometimes is that they have a percent of total and it adds up to more than 100%. And there's this question of like, my percent should up to 100. Why is it going
Yeah.
more? And I set up an example over here. Sorry, this window got so big, but here I have some data and I have my count distinctive value is 2, 3, and 4 for these 3 colors. And then when I do a percent of total, quick table calculation, so at just a couple of clicks, I'm doing that quick table calculation percent of total, and it's 40, 60, and 80%, which adds up to 180%, not
Yeah, that's more than
100%.
100. Yeah.
Yep. So what we're going to do is dive through total versus window functions and get to a point that we can explain why this is happening and how to fix it.
Okay.
Um,
Super.
and with that, we're going to be talking a bit about table because total and window sum or the window functions or table calculations. So we're going to be talking a bit about table calculations. If they're totally new to you, then um, we'll give you a pointer to some Tableau training on that just to at least get you going on it. So with this data set, I set up a really simple data set that just has 9 rows of data in it. There's 3 colors, blue, orange, and purple. We have a range of values, 1 record for each. And then over here in our summary part of our dashboard, we can see we have 9 rows. The countive value is 9, so we don't have any nulls. Count distinctive value is 5. The average of value across all the data is 2.56, and the sum of all these values is 23. So we'll be coming back to these in some different ways.
So just to confirm, the value is this arbitrary number.
Yep.
Okay. And it just has a range of 1 to 5, and there's 5 distinct values.
Yep.
There's no sparsity here. Every cell has a value in it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So no nulls, nothing that. All right. So let's start out with looking at window sum and total. So I have my color, I have my sum of value here. So we've got total of 3 for blue, 6 for orange, 14 for purple for this,
Okay.
the values of our sum. And then if I drag out window sum of value, I'll drop it on the show me. Let's just make these cells a little bigger here so we can read them. So here we have that 3, 6, 14, that adds up to 23. That's our window sum of value. I'll drag out total. And the total of the sum of value as a table calculation also adds up to 23. So at this point, it can seem like these two things are same.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying here is they're not always the same.
Yes.
Just because here they're the same doesn't mean, and that makes sense. Why would there be 2 different functions that do the same thing?
Yes.
They must be different, or they would just have one function.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Now, when we're looking at, like, if I go to create a calculated field in Tableau, and let me just expand this window and look at my table calculations functions. If we scroll down and look, there's just that one total function.
Mm-hmm.
However, below that, we can see we've got a whole bunch of different window functions. So there's that window sum we've been using, average, correlation, count, max, median, min, etc. Lots of functions there. So let's look and see what some of them do. Starting with our sum of value, we've got that window sum, we have total, but then I've created some calculations already. I can drag out window average.
Okay.
So this window average 7.67 is that 23 divided by 3.
Okay, so the window average is kind of taking the window sum, which is summing up all of the value, and then it's dividing by 3 because there's 3 colors on the view.
Yep.
Okay.
So there's our, and I just did a little type in calculation of 23 over 3 just to show it here.
Got it. Okay.
Now if I drag out window max, that's taking the max of our values, which if I scroll left here, that's 14. There's our 14. If I do median as yet another one, so the median is returning 6, which we have 3 values. The one in the middle is 6.
Okay.
That's our median.
So all of these window functions are dealing with the window. In this case, the partition of the table calc is the entire view, but it's basically the window of aggregate numbers that are the sum of the value for the 3 colors that are in the view.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we're either taking the median of that window, or the average of that window, or the mean of that window, or the sum of it.
Yep, you got it.
Okay.
Another way I think of this, because I set up this tabular view here, I have this table of color and sum of value as a basic thing, and the table calculation of the window function is operating over that table of results. So we're going to be filling in this table as we go. So given topics, what's different about total, what's different about window functions. So kind of what's our short and our long definition of them. what kind of aggregation do they do? What are they calculating over?
Okay.
So in the case of window functions, what we've seen here is they're doing an aggregation of an aggregation. So we have like sum of value, and then we're doing the window max of that, or the window sum, or the window median, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
The longer definition is we have a table calculation aggregation that we're doing of some aggregate measure to do that. And then the kind of or type of aggregation that we're doing is going to depend on that function name. If we're doing window sum, then it's going to be a sum. If we're doing window core, that's a correlation function, and so on.
Okay, so we've got this table of aggregate values that came back from the query, and the
Mm-hmm.
window function is just going to further aggregate those values
Yes.
within the window of the partition of that table calc.
Yep. Which you just kind of nailed this calculates over piece of it. So if we have the compute using set up in different ways, we're going to end up with a different computation on that. So with that, now let's talk about the total function.
Okay, so total's different. That was all window stuff.
Yep. And to explain how total is different, it really helps to use something other than sum as an aggregation. So here we're using average as an aggregation for value. So the average for blue is 1.5, average for orange is 2, average for purple is 3.5.
Okay.
So now when we do, if I do window sum of average of value, that's now 7 because we're summing up 1.5 plus 2 plus 3.5.
Okay, and so this is what we just did. There's this table of aggregate values, 1.5, 2, and 3.5, and the window sum of those values adds up to 7.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Now if I do the window average, it's going to be 2.33.
Which is 7
instead
divided
of the
by 3.
2.56. It's 7 divided by 3. Yep. Exactly. Now when I do total of average value, here, that comes out to 2.56.
Oh, okay. So now the two are beginning to diverge because they're not the same thing. The window average is taking 7 divided by 3.
Mm-hmm.
What's the total doing?
And the total here, if we go back to our summary that we did at the beginning, it's the total of the average is doing the average in this case across all of the data that's in our partition, which is all of our data in this case. So it's 23 divided by 9. Because we have 23, sum of values 23 divided by 9 non-null values. Gets us that average value of 2.56.
Okay, so it's as if that total calculation isn't really so concerned with the window of results that came back. You know, you've got that table of aggregated results there, blue 1.5, orange 2, and purple 3.5. The window average is concerned with that table of aggregate data that came back, but the total isn't concerned with that thing.
Yep. The total. So this is one of the ways I think about this difference between the window functions and the total function is that the total is operating over the totality of the data. And the window function is operating over the window that we've given it.
Okay, that's useful.
In essence,
which is mnemonic the trick table there. So it's like the total is looking at all of the underlying records, and saying of all of those underlying records down there, what's the average of the value? Okay.
So another way to think of total is we're aggregating at a different level of detail.
Right, because the window is broken up by color. Right, so the window is partitioned with the color as the dimension in the view.
Partition has a window has a particular, or partition has a particular meaning in Tableau. So it's more that the window is this. We've already aggregated data in the view. And now the window is operating over that aggregation we've done in the view.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas total is saying, okay, whatever you've decided to do, average of value in the view, broken down by color. In this case, our total is compute using across all the dimensions in the view. So the level of detail that it's going to aggregate at is all of the data versus by color.
Right. Yeah. So
In
the
this
total
case.
isn't concerned with the dimensions that are on the canvas or the level of detail of the canvas, uh, the viz level of detail. The total just isn't
Mhm.
concerned with that. It's just
If we're
looking at all.
computing on all the dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
it's ignoring that.
Okay.
Yep. So so that level of detail, like I've been saying, is determined by the compute using of the calculation. So if we change the compute using and partition based on some other dimensions, our total is going to be broken down by that. The aggregation type here, in the case of the window functions, where we can have average as our aggregation and then do a window sum of the average or a window median of the average. With the total, the aggregation that total is using is going to be whatever's inside that. So when we do total of average of value, that total is going to be an average. And then that what it's computing over, what we've talked about is in essence, it's computing over rows of data. So with that, I'm going to actually jump ahead a slide here, because this was a slide we'd previously shown in the mental models video, and you should be seeing a link to that on your screen. And what's happening is when we're dragging and dropping a field on the canvas, Tableau's running VizQL. That's creating SQL in our data source or whatever language our data source needs, and then returning those aggregate cache of query results back to the view to render the marks in the view. So that those window functions are working on that table of query results, whereas total is operating on those underlying rows of data.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes it super clear. Where the window is just operating on the aggregate result set that came back from that query. And with those window functions you mentioned, I could re-aggregate that aggregate result
Mm-hmm.
set with a window average or a window median or a correlation. There's lots of different
Mm-hmm.
stuff I could do.
Yep.
Whereas the total isn't looking at that local cache of query results. The total is looking at all of the observations that happened in
Mm-hmm.
the underlying data set. And there's only one type of aggregation that can happen, and that's whatever it was that the total is run off of, the regular aggregate function
Yes.
that the total is run on top
Mm-hmm.
of. And it's just going to go against all of those underlying records.
Yes. Oh.
Okay.
Now there is kind of this word effectively I put in here because
Okay.
Tableau is trying to be smart about it. So if it can, the total will actually run over the query results to get you what you want, or it might change the query slightly to get what you want. So we're going to do another video that goes into more details on that because there's some performance impacts in certain scenarios
Got
that
it. Right. So
are
now
useful
I
to talk about.
remember total is one of the few table calculations that might run an extra query to the data source.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas perhaps all of them or nearly all of the other table calcs don't have to go back to rerun an
Mm-hmm.
extra query to the data source because they can get what they need from that local cache of query results.
Yep.
And it sounds like what you're saying is sometimes total can get what it needs from that extra cache of query results also, but
Yes.
it may need to run an
Mm-hmm.
extra query.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And not just one extra query. So that's
Could
part
be
of what
various. Okay.
we'll talk about. Yep. Yeah. So with that, I want to talk about a couple other places where we can see total show up, and also given what we know now, we can solve this percent of total problem.
Oh, right. Because there's that 180% problem from the top of the episode.
Yes. So if
Okay.
I do a quick table calculation percent of total, I'm getting that 40, 60, 80. Let me bring out the count distinctive value again so we can see 2, 3, 4. Now, what we're probably expecting to happen is that 2, 3, 4 to be, that adds up. 2 plus 3 plus 4 is 9. So I'd expect 2 divided by 9, or like 22% kind of here, and 33% and 44% here, not 40%. So what's that denominator that Tableau is using? Now, a way we can find that when we're using a quick table calculation is we can just drag our quick table calculation over to our data window, and then Tableau is going to create a calculated field here.
Just drag it over there, and then you can edit and see what's inside of it.
Exactly. So what Tableau is doing here is doing that count distinctive value and then dividing it by total of count distinctive value. So let's look at, I've already created total count distinctive value here, but we can actually select this and drag it out of our calculation editor.
Drag it out and see what is that thing. So the denominator is 5.
Is 5. So
I got it. And so that's because the original aggregate function is a count distinct. The total is going against all of the underlying records in the data set, and there's 5 distinct values. And so that total count distinctive value is coming back with the number 5, which makes the denominator smaller than 9, which is what has us adding up to 180%.
Yep. So 2 divided by 5 is 40%. 3 divided by 5 is 60%, and so on. So that exactly that where we get our 180%.
Okay.
So this is where, if we have something like this count distinct measure, and we want, there's various reasons why we may want to actually add these up instead of use the total count distinct here. So I can do a window sum of count distinctive value and sum those values in the view and get the 9 that we're expecting here.
And there you're just fabricating your own denominator. You're just saying, hey, the denominator that Tableau came up with a quick table calculation was wrong. I want my own denominator. It should be 9.
Yep. And with that, then I've got a count distinctive value divided by window sum of value here, showing the formula right here, and that's giving us the 22%, 33%, 44%.
And that stuff all adds up to 100.
Yep. So that's how we solve that. My percent of total doesn't add up to 100%, is we need to look at our numerator and our denominator and validate that they're both what we want to have. And in this case, we needed to change Tableau's default aggregation and use in the quick table calculation, and instead use a custom table calculation to do it.
Got it. Okay, so the quick table calculation is a quick kind of thing. Maybe sometimes you need to make your own in order to get the right number.
Yep. And it's using, and the other thing to know about that percent of total is it's using the total aggregation and not a window sum aggregation in doing that. So there's a couple other places where this total versus window function shows up in the interface. So we're just going to go through those, and that'll wrap things up. So one of them is with reference lines. So if I built my lovely view here, I've got my blue, orange, and purple bars here. There's my average of value for each. I go over to the analytics pane and I say, I want to drag out an average line, and let's put it on table. And then this average is coming out as 2.33. And this is...
that looks like a window average.
7 divided by 2.33. It's a window average. That is the default for Tableau's average and median reference lines.
Okay, so that analytics pane is basically a window table calculation.
This average line is a window table calculation. I'm going to drag out a reference line now because I can actually do all the customization on it. I want a line, entire table, and my value is average value. And then I'm going to change the aggregation from average to total. And this is going to use that total aggregation. And we can see over here, there's my total line. Let me just hit OK here. And if I hover on that, that's the 2.56. That is my population average. or the average of all of the data that went into this view is the 2.56.
Mm-hmm. So the
Um,
2.33 number is the window thing that
average.
is running across values that have already been aggregated.
Yes.
The 2.56 number is using a total table calculation, and that's looking at all of the underlying records that made up
Mm-hmm.
what you're seeing on the screen, but before they've been aggregated in the view.
Yes. Yep. Yep. So this is total versus window average in reference lines.
In the reference lines. Okay,
Yep.
useful.
Now, the other place where this shows up is with grand totals.
Oh, so this stuff is literally peppered all throughout Tableau Desktop. This okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right.
And so and this is one of the places this shows up for people is I drag out average value for the things, and then I do a total, like drag out my grand totals, and it's 2.56. And in this case, the copy is just the same thing right now.
Okay.
And if you're in Excel, for example, and you do this, that Excel total is going to be the 2.33 that is the average of these three values.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is one of those places where people will go, Tableau is broken, I don't get it.
And it's because the
Walk
grand
away
total that you're using from the analysis menu is doing the total thing, which is looking at all
yes.
of the underlying records,
Mm-hmm.
not the average of the three
No.
aggregate values that came back.
No. So Tableau back in version 8 added a feature called in the interface is called total using. The name for the feature when it first came out was called two pass totals.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea in this is instead of using this automatic total, which is the total equivalent to the total table calculation, we can say, let's do total using average. And so we're going to use the average of the marks in the view.
So that's swapping it to run a window average of the marks in the view.
And now we see that 2.33 that we were potentially expecting to see.
Got it.
And so the total using gives us some different options here.
Yeah.
Some average, minimum, maximum. So in the Tableau interface, when we see total or with the function as a function reference or total or automatic, that's something to think about. We're going to be getting that total aggregation out of that. Whereas if we're seeing the aggregation keyword, like sum or median or window sum, window median, and so on, then that's where we're getting that equivalent of a window function that is an aggregation of an aggregation.
Right. So in the grand totals, if I say total all using average, then
Yep.
then that thing is doing the windows piece of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I say total all using automatic, or if the total keyword is in there, it's doing the total behavior instead of the window behavior.
Yep. So what, this is kind of an overview of the total and window functions. And then later on in the series, we're going to do another view that does a deeper dive into it for the people who want to get really nerdy about it. So we're going to talk about other differences between total and window functions. So things like offsets and the impact on queries that we alluded to, the attribute function, data densification, and so on. Number of other factors that make one function work better than the other for different use cases.
Got it. Okay, so the rabbit hole goes deeper.
Yes.
Okay.
I mentioned that I'm excited about this series because it's a chance for me to do a little bit of a brain dump on it, but also make that rabbit hole understandable for people when you have that table calculation and you just want to get a total on a table calculation. Just give me the right number. And we can do that in Tableau in several different ways. We'll be talking about the different ways we can do that. And when you understand what those different ways are, it is really a leveling up in understanding of Tableau as a whole and what's possible with it.
Yeah.
And that was something for me that doing those totals blog posts years and years ago really helped me with, is my understanding of, okay, what is Tableau up to as we're dragging and dropping fields?
Yeah. What's going on in there? When you know how things work, you can work with them.
Yep, exactly. So, and this will totally feed into more of the mental model stuff as we go into it. So I'm looking forward to this. So
Yeah, me too. What a treat. I
yeah.
mean, you mentioned in
Mhm.
Windows, or in Tableau version 8, they released this feature. That
Mhm.
was the version that I first started using Tableau on. And so to have somebody like yourself who was around even years before that to remember when they
Mhm.
released the feature, and who's been tracking all of these things to be able to parse it apart and explain it to us is really valuable. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. Have a good one.
Okay, great. We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye.
Action Analytics.